Thank you for tuning in and welcome back to the Sandwich of Coherency. So let's just go ahead and jump right into this. Recently, the White House ran a story about a very tragic event that happened to a 10-year-old child. And it really touched at people's heartstrings. And it has caused a lot of fervor, and a lot of people are angry in the United States right now. And they're highly angry about the fact that the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade. This is what they're more angry about, to me, from what I've seen, than they are about the tragedy that happened to the child, or even concerned for where is the person that allegedly did this to the child. And that really concerns me about what the public opinion is doing. Now, like I said, this is a very tragic thing. And I really hope that if this is a true story, that this does open people's eyes to how we really need to have a bigger talk about the abortion laws and the whole situation surrounding Roe versus Wade. An actual talk, not come from an emotional place, but to actually talk about the facts of the matter, have a discussion, and not scream and shout at each other. Otherwise, you're not going to make any progress because nobody's going to be listening to the other side. They're just waiting for their chance to speak. They're not actually listening. But, and here's what I want to get to now. This smells rotten. This whole situation, the story surrounding it, it all sounds very rotten. Now, I understand that might upset a lot of people, but I'm just looking back into the past and just seeing things from a bigger picture here. And I feel like the story's not the same, but the situation is the same, and we've seen it before. The White House is now running a very sensational story without any fact checking, without any investigation, without finding out what actually happened before we let this senile potato go up here and embarrass himself. This has happened before. It happened during the Obama administration. Remember, hands up, don't shoot. Well, we know that was actually not true. But they ran that story, and they ran with it and caused the destruction of Ferguson and caused riots and destruction in other areas throughout the United States because of this. Because the White House had Obama up there talking about it and giving it his blessing without the White House doing any information. No back checking, no searching to find out the truth before we let him go up there and embarrass himself. This happened before. Now, many people might not remember this, and I know a lot of people watching this will probably be too young to even know this actually happened. But we had testimony which was given before a human, what the hell, it escapes me now. But basically a humanitarian census group. A testimony is given to the federal government, pretty much. And this was what George Bush Sr. repeated. Many senators repeated it. Many politicians. The media ran with this story. And they used this as a good driving point to get Americans to understand why we need to go in to Iraq. Desert Storm. If many people don't remember, for those that do, you understand exactly what I'm talking about. When the 15-year-old child went before the group and testified about how she saw Iraqi soldiers pulling babies out of incubators and throwing them on the floor. Now, we're going to get into all of that in this episode, but I want to start with this first clip from Jesse Waters.
There's been one particular story that caught the nation's attention. It appeared in the Indianapolis Star newspaper back on July 1st. A horrifying ordeal involving a 10-year-old girl. Quote, Dr. Caitlin Bernard, an Indianapolis obstetrician gynecologist, took a call from a colleague, a child abuse doctor in Ohio. Hours after the Supreme Court action, the Buckeye State had outlawed any abortion after 6 weeks. Now, this doctor had a 10-year-old patient in the office who was 6 weeks and 3 days pregnant. Could Bernard help? This is a heinous story. 10-year-old girl was raped and was pregnant with her rapist's baby. There's nothing more despicable than that. And she was now unable to end her pregnancy in the state of Ohio. So according to the report, that's where Dr. Caitlin Bernard steps in. Since Indiana had yet to change their abortion laws, the girl could still end her pregnancy if she crossed state lines. Her doctor got in contact with Bernard, and the 10-year-old was apparently driven across state lines, and her pregnancy was ended by Bernard in Indiana. The story quickly took hold all across the globe. Headlines, home and abroad, highlighted the tragic situation occurring, and it wasn't long before it became the focus of cable news. Once the media ran with it, it became a central part of the West Wing's talking point.
This isn't some imagined horror. It's already happening. Just last week, it was reported that a 10-year-old girl was a rape victim in Ohio. 10 years old. And she was forced to have to travel out of the state to Indiana to seek to terminate the pregnancy and maybe save her life. Imagine being that little girl. I'm serious. Just imagine being that little girl. 10 years.
Primetime decided to investigate this alleged child rape. But we quickly found out that authorities in Ohio haven't even begun a criminal investigation into the rape. This doesn't make any sense. No one reported this child rape to law enforcement. The Washington Post agreed with us and is digging into this too. Quote, under Ohio law, a physician, as mandated under Ohio Revised Code 2151-421, would be required to report any case of known or suspected physical, sexual, or emotional abuse or neglect of a child to their local child welfare or law enforcement agency. But we haven't found any evidence that this child rape was reported to law enforcement or any child welfare system. And neither has the Washington Post. And Primetime called Ohio Governor Mike DeWine's office, and they couldn't find any evidence of investigation or charges being filed anywhere in their state. So we followed up with the state attorney general's office, and they too have yet to find any record on the matter. And we'll talk to the AG about this shortly. Then we called all of the abortion clinics in Ohio to see if they filed a police report about a 10-year-old being raped. None of the abortion providers in Ohio could provide any useful information. And from what we can find, no local newspaper or TV station picked up the story. The only source for this entire story is Dr. Caitlin Bernard, the abortion doctor in Indiana. Bernard ran quickly to the cameras last week. This is nothing new for Bernard. She's been kind of a press darling, never shied away from a story on abortion. Her quotes on the subject appearing in the New York Times, PBS, Politico over the last couple of years. But suddenly, Dr. Bernard doesn't want to talk to the press. We reached out to her for comment, and she told us, quote, I have no information to share about this. And this isn't a partisan thing. The Washington Post also reached out to her for comment, and she said the exact same thing. She has nothing more to share. Now, Indiana law also requires someone like Dr. Bernard to report child rape to law enforcement, but we can't find any evidence that she did that there. In fact, Bernard has a history of not reporting abuse cases to the police, which we'll discuss later. So we're having no luck confirming this story. So how did the Indianapolis Star confirm the story? Well, the Washington Post says the reporting looks very suspect. Quote, There is no indication that the newspaper made other attempts to confirm her account. The story's lead reporter, Shari Rudofsky, did not respond to a query asking whether additional sourcing was obtained. So the Indianapolis Star released one of the most viral stories of the summer, a story that's been seized on by the President of the United States, and now they're running and hiding.
Okay, so you see what I'm saying? Just doing a little digging, a little checking on the information, we find out that this doesn't hold any water. Something about this seems rotten. I mean, there's too many of these variables that are saying that this is not a true story. And this is a story that's being run without any checking to find out whether or not it's true, because they know right now in today's political atmosphere that would really play on people's emotions. And with the elections coming up, this could drive home the agenda that the Democrats want. But let's ask ourselves something. Do we live in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, the 1970s, hell, the 80s, or even the 90s? No, we don't. People have the ability to check whether or not they're being lied to by the federal government. They have access to information. For some reason, I think these people in government just keep forgetting this. And as I said before in multiple episodes, the White House seems to have forgotten that Americans have the internet. So, as I mentioned, the testimony by the 15-year-old child that helped to drive the United States into Kuwait. Let's go ahead and watch that real quick. And you'll understand why my opinion on this story coming out from Joe Biden is not the opinion that many people are taking right now. You'll understand why when I see this, I'm a little hesitant to jump on board with it. So let's just go ahead and play that clip now.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, my name is Naira, and I just came out of Kuwait. My mother and I were in Kuwait on August 2nd for a peaceful summer holiday. My older sister had a baby on July 29th, and we wanted to spend some time in Kuwait with her. I only pray that none of my 10th grade classmates had a summer vacation like I did. I may have wished sometime that I could be an adult, that I could grow up quickly. What I saw happen to the children of Kuwait and to my country has changed my life forever. It has changed the life of all Kuwaitis, young and old. We are children no more. My sister, with my 5-day-old nephew, traveled across the desert to safety. There was no milk available for the baby in Kuwait. They barely escaped when their car was stuck in the desert sand, and help came from Saudi Arabia. I stayed behind and wanted to do something for my country. The second week after an invasion, I volunteered at the Al-Adan hospital with 12 other women who wanted to help as well. I was the youngest volunteer. The other women were from 20 to 30 years old. While I was there, I saw the Iraqi soldiers come into the hospital with guns. They took the babies out of the incubators, and left the children to die on the cold floor. It was horrifying. I could not help but think of my nephew, who, if born premature, might have died that day as well. After I left the hospital, some of my friends and I distributed flyers condemning the Iraqi invasion until we were warned we might be killed if the Iraqis saw us. The Iraqis have destroyed everything in Kuwait. They stripped the supermarkets of food, the pharmacies of medicine, the factories of medical supplies, ransacked our houses, and tortured neighbors and friends. I saw and talked to a friend of mine after his torture and released by the Iraqis. He is 22, but he looked as though he could have been an old man. The Iraqis dunked his head into a swimming pool until he almost drowned. They pulled out his fingernails and applied electric shock to sensitive private parts of his body. He was lucky to survive. If an Iraqi soldier was found dead in a neighborhood, they burned to the ground all the houses in the general vicinity and would not let firefighters come until only ash and rubble was left. The Iraqis were making fun of President Bush and verbally and physically abusing my family and me on our way out of Kuwait. We only did so because life in Kuwait became unbearable. They have forced us to hide, burn, or destroy everything identifying our country and our government. I want to emphasize that Kuwait is our mother and the Emir our father. We repeated this on the roofs of our houses in Kuwait until the Iraqis began shooting at us. And we shall repeat it again. I am glad I am 15, old enough to remember Kuwait before Saddam Hussein destroyed it, and young enough to rebuild it. Thank you.
Mayor, thank you. Let me thank all of our witnesses. We've passed 8 years in the existence of the Congressional Human Rights Caucus. We've had scores of hearings about human rights abuses throughout the world. And I know my co-chairman, Tom Lantos, will join me in telling you that we have never heard in all this time, in all circumstances, a record of inhumanity and brutality and sadism.
So you hear all that, and it absolutely plays at your heartstrings. You automatically think, oh my gosh, this is so tragic. As he said, this is the worst thing that we've ever heard. We've never heard anything as tragic or evil as this. Immediately, the public jumped behind going in even more, giving the full force of the United States behind Desert Storm. They now had the approval of the American public, and they could go full force. And then we find out this random girl just happens to be the daughter of the ambassador to the United States. The daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador to the United States. Just sat up there, that little skank lied her fucking tail off. A lot of soldiers got done really badly during Desert Storm. And in part, a lot of it, the ongoing, let's just say that this testimony is something that really stings at people that remember it. So when I see a situation like right now with what the President of the United States is doing, coming out here and throwing this story out there like that, I'm a little hesitant because there will be public consequences because of this. If a story like this, given the political climate right now, given the way society in the United States is moving at the moment, you've got people harassing Supreme Court judges in public. You've already had an attempt at an assassination on a Supreme Court judge. It's stories like this that will get those people that were on the fence about doing something absolutely stupid to go out and do something absolutely stupid without knowing any of the actual information. And many people who would get behind that idea and think to go out and do this don't know any of the information and have no idea whether or not the story is true. All they know is that their heartstrings were tugged and they must act. and they will act irrationally. So the consequences that will happen because of this will be directly connected to the media and to the president himself, unless we find out quickly that this is actually a nonsensical, just a sensational bullshit story. And as I said, if this actually turns out to be something that's actually true, well then yes, those laws are fucked and something needs to be done about it. But we can't dive head first without having the information. So let's wait and see what happens. But I thank you for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.